above that is died off. And so Moses says, how do I get these guys ready to go take the land? And so the Pentateuch is written partly with that in mind. We always have to look at the Bible and say, what was intended for the original reader? And then if we don't understand that, then we're going to get all messed up in what we think it means to us. And the third group of people that we want to make sure that we apply the lessons to are us, right? So 3 groups of people that we're talking about, and figuring out how these lessons and how this text applies to all of them and helps all of them. I'll just go ahead and bow for a word of prayer. Our great God, we love you. We thank you for all the wonderful blessings that you give us every day. You are a God that is forever present with us. You've always desired to be with your people, and you're with your people. And the book of Exodus shows clearly that you love your people and that you can help your people. And we know that you love us. We know that you want to be with us now and for all of eternity. And we know that you help us every single day. Thank you for the Bible, Lord, and all the wonderful blessings it gives us. Thank you for the stories in the Bible that we can learn from. Help us as we put ourselves in the story that we'll learn lessons that you would have us learn. Through Jesus we pray. Amen. All right, so if we go through and look just briefly at the 2 chapters before, chapters 1 and chapter 2, and I want to highlight a couple things in here. Pharaoh came to the throne who forgot Joseph. Israel was growing too fast. He didn't like that. And so he decided he was going to have three things that he tried in order to get Israel to stop growing so fast. 1, hard labor. Just work them to death. If you work them too hard, they won't have the ability to reproduce. Surely their birth rates would slow down if we treat them like trash. But the more they were treated like trash and the more that they were oppressed, the more that they grew. Well, Pharaoh was upset about that. So the second thing that he decided to do was, let's have the midwives that deliver the babies for the Israelites, we'll tell them that if it is a boy, go ahead and kill the baby. Now, these 2 midwives feared God more than they feared Pharaoh, and so they said, we're not doing that. And Pharaoh, can you imagine how scary it would have been to be called into Pharaoh's office, if you will, and have to give an account for why you were disobeying a direct order from the king? It would have been scary moments for them. And they did not do it, and it says God blessed them. God gave them their own houses because of that, or their own families, because they did not do, they feared God more than they feared the king. Well, when they wouldn't do what the Pharaoh asked, he said, well, my third option is just tell all of my people that if you see an Israelite give birth and it is a male child, you go and throw that male child into the river and let it die. Cruel, despicable behavior. But that's what was happening in Israel at the time. And we talked about how bad that would be, how bad it would feel if you were having children. You would probably be hoping it was a girl instead of a boy for one of the first times in history. And it would have just been devastating to have your baby taken and known that it was dead. We know that 2 people came along that already had 2 children, but they had Moses. They were both Levites. And when Moses was born, he was a good-looking kid. They knew he was a good-looking kid, so they hid him at home for 3 months. After the 3 months was over, they couldn't hide him at home anymore. They decided to make an ark, put him in the ark, put him out in the Nile River. How hard that would have been to put your kid in the Nile River and walk away. We know his sister Miriam stayed there to find out what was happening with the boy, and lo and behold, Pharaoh's daughter came and she saw Moses. She heard Moses crying. Go check out what that is. They find out that it is a baby, and she goes, that must be one of the Hebrew child. Miriam comes in and says, you want me to go find someone to feed her? And yeah, they go get the mother, and the mother feeds the baby, probably for 3 years or so. That was the typical time that a Hebrew mother nursed their child, was typically 3 years. After Moses was 40 years old, he saw 2 people fighting. One was an Egyptian. One was an Israelite. He killed the Egyptian, buried him in the sand. Next day, 2 Israelites were fighting, and he decided to tell the one that was not doing the right thing, why are you hurting your brother like this? Why are you doing this? He goes, who made you a ruler and a judge over us? Are you going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian? At that point, Moses says, it's known, so I got to get out of here. So he leaves and goes to Midian, where he goes to the well, which is a good place to find people, especially women in those days, and he found a group of women, 7 daughters of one man, Reuel or Jethro, same guy, different names. He actually has another name that get mentioned in another part of the Bible as well. And so that was where we sort of ended off. But there's a couple of things that I want to make sure that we understand. I told you that this exercise here is extremely important when I'm teaching, because I want you to go through and be able to either highlight the points like this or write it in paragraph form. If you're a writer, you love to write it in paragraph form, put it in your own words. That's exactly what Stephen did, right? In oral format. He knew how to tell that story right on top of his head. He told the whole history of the children of Israel. You need to learn how to tell the whole story of the Bible real quickly, and especially these sections like this. And then it was what the Hebrew writer did as well. This will help you. This is a good tool. It will be good practice for you to be able to do that. Another very important element of being able to tell a Bible story that's engaging and also accurate is whenever that story is told in the Bible, you need to go read that too, okay? You need to go read that and put them together. The greatest example of that are the Gospels, right? You have a story in the Gospels that happened. To tell a story from the Gospels from just one account, you're probably going to leave something out. So you want to look at all three writers, all three witnesses, if you will, and put all of what they had to say about that story together and come up with one narrative that sort of includes all the information. God repeats his stories over and over and over again. He does that for a reason. And so every time he repeats a story, we got to figure out why is he repeating the story and what can I learn from the story this time that I didn't learn last time. Another thing that I want you to learn how to do as we go along is pick out the details in the story that maybe you have overlooked. Always ask something in the story. When you see something you don't understand, ask, why is that here? Is this significant? Chances are there is some kind of significance to it, and a very brief look at that will help you understand that together. So, what I want to do is look at some of that with you. At the end of chapter 2, Moses runs away from Egypt trying to save his own life. But I want to read a couple other times where this story is, and we noted this the other day, but there's a couple parts about this that I want to turn to. So turn to Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11. We're going to read verses 24 through 27. And in your mind, I want you to notice a couple phrases in here as we read these and see how consistent and how God ties these stories together, even though they're written by so many authors over so many years. It's pretty impressive. Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 24 says this, by faith Moses, when he became of age. All right, when he became of age. You're going to see that again. Refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he looked to the reward. By faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. So when you read the account in Exodus, and you don't read the account in Hebrews or the account of Stephen, you might miss a couple important things. You might think from the Exodus reading that Moses fled fearing for his life. Maybe there was some of that in there, but what does this say? What does the Hebrew writer say? Was he afraid of Pharaoh? No, he wasn't fearing the wrath of the king. So that's one small thing that you see in one side of the story that helps understand what's taking place back here in Exodus. So look at, go back to Exodus chapter 2. Exodus chapter 2. And verse 11. Exodus 2 and verse 11. So just make sure your marker's in Exodus 2, Exodus 3, okay? Exodus 2 and verse 11. Now it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown. It refers back to Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 24 where it says he became of age. So he became of age and he was grown. What does Stephen tell us that age was? At least in part, he's 40 years old, right? 40 years old when all these particular things happen. So when does somebody in your mind become a grown-up? You don't need a microphone for this. You can just shout out an age. When do you say that person's a grown-up based on age alone?
18.
18. All right. You can do a lot of things at 18 that you couldn't do at 17. Going to the military and fighting for our country is one of them. 18? Everybody agree with 18 or do you have a different age? What? Early 20s? 21 is another age where we think, all right, 21 is an age that we have said someone has grown to 21. Now they can do things like drink alcohol. So now they must be totally grown. We're giving them more permissions to do certain things. Randy?
No, I was just going to say, research shows it's early 20s before the brain
Yeah.
develops. So the old guys had it right. 21 is better than
Yeah, so 25 seems to be the age where a lot of people say it. 25, your brain is fully developed. The reason I bring this up is because Moses made a decision when he had the wisdom of a grown-up. He had all of his faculties present. He was grown when he made the decision, and he made the decision to forsake Egypt. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing for him to leave. He already made the decision as a grown-up that he was not going to enjoy the riches of Egypt. He was going to suffer with God's people instead. You put all those together, I think it helps see some of those things a little clearer. I do want to read Acts chapter 7 again real quick. Acts chapter 7, 23 through 29. Acts 7, 23 through 29. It says, "Now when he was 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brethren, the children of Israel. And seeing one of them suffer wrong." That's another thing that you have. In Exodus 2 and verse 11, it's talked about as looked at their burdens. And Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 24, it's referred to as affliction. So you have affliction, you have burdens, and you have suffering wrong, all linked together to say exactly what's happening here. "He defended and avenged him who was oppressed, and struck down the Egyptian, for he supposed that his brethren would have understood that God would deliver them by his hand. But they did not understand. And the next day he appeared to two of them as they were fighting and tried to reconcile them, saying, 'Men, you are brethren, why do you wrong one another?' But he who did his neighbor wrong pushed him away, saying, 'Who made you a ruler and judge over us? Do you want to kill me as you did the Egyptian yesterday?' Then at that saying Moses fled and became a dweller in the land of Midian, where he had 2 sons. So I have a sort of a bonus question for you here. It wasn't in on your sheet. And it's this. Describe Moses the day that he killed the Egyptian. What does this Moses at 40 years old, the day that he killed the Egyptian, look like if you were describing him? What? He was royalty. Yeah, he's grown up in Pharaoh's house. There's a lot of talk about when the Exodus took place. We were taking the 1445 date. Whatever date you take depends on who the Pharaoh might have been at that particular time. But there's a lot of people that say that Moses would have been the heir to the throne, or would have only had one other person to compete with for that throne. So he's royalty. Randy, are you guys, anybody, raise your hand so these guys get the microphone to you ahead of time. All right, Randy, go ahead. I'll try to repeat it.
He was at the prime of his masculinity.
All right. He was a manly man, right? He wasn't afraid to go face to face with somebody and even to kill somebody if he was doing the wrong to one of God's people. He was smart, right? Go ahead and raise your hand. Get a microphone. So this guy was a smart guy. He knew all the wisdom of the Egyptians. He had the Ivy League education. I put that his hands were probably soft, right? His hands, he didn't work very much probably. He had servants that did everything that he needed. He had the best food in all of Egypt. He had the treasures. Joe?
Unless I'm mistaken, this is the first time that we see that he goes among his people. Now, he probably was around them, but this is where he goes out specifically to his people.
Yeah, it's the first time it's recorded for us.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I could have been before, but this is where we see where he goes out and he sees an Egyptian striking an Israelite because he wanted to be out among his people.
Yeah, he didn't go out willy-nilly, if you will. He went out knowing that there was risk involved in what he was about to do because he already made that decision. He already made the decision, I am going to suffer with God's people instead of enjoying the things of Egypt. Brian?
Yeah, he seemed confident in his plan.
Confident of that one.
I got a plan. I'm about to carry this out. I'm rescuing my people from Israel or from Egypt.
I see a very confident man here, don't you? I mean, and not only that, one that's excited for the prospects of what's about to happen. Surely, as I go out among the people, they're en masse going to understand what I am doing, and they're going to fall in line. They're going to want me to do what I want to do. So I see a very confident, smart, wise, strong, powerful man who has made a decision and goes out and takes an action based upon that. Randy?
Yeah, and there's a great contrast I've noticed recently is that here he's very confident, but when he's now called by God, he becomes very humble and meek.
Yeah, we're gonna note that when we get to chapter 3. There's sort of a change in his demeanor on that particular day. All right, so let me ask you this question. Describe Moses the very next day after he comes face to face with a knowledge that Pharaoh knows about, and the Bible does say he knows about this. Pharaoh knows about this and wants to kill Moses because he has done this. Now describe, Phil has one. Now describe some things that might characterize Moses at that particular point. Is he rich anymore? You have an instant wealth to rag story, right? This isn't like a guy gradually lost a little bit every day. He lost every single thing physically he had in one day. He's now on the run. He has nothing. He doesn't. Nobody goes with him. He doesn't have servants. He doesn't have animals. He has nothing. Bill?
Yeah, I was going to say, if I was Moses, he took a calculated risk, first of all, to stand with God's people instead of with Pharaoh. And he knew that when he did that, he was going to lose favor with Pharaoh. He knew that. He knew this was not going to go well. And when he killed the Egyptian, he knew it was over. That part of his life was over. And he couldn't go back to it and say to the Pharaoh, hey, I made a mistake. I realized, give me a second chance. He didn't do that. He knew. The problem was he acted on his own before God told him to. That was the problem. He tried to secure the freedom for his people by his own means.
Yeah, but he thought it was happening at that time. So I think the next day he's also confused. And maybe a little bit discouraged. Why didn't this go as my plan? I had these plans, and it was supposed to go this particular way. So he's probably frustrated with the things that are going. He's dirt poor, and he's sort of hopeless at this point. I've blown my one and only chance to save God's people. This is what I've made that decision to do that, and I would be thinking, he was probably thinking, that I blew my one and only chance to do this. It's a totally different story. I mean, he has no bed, no place to, you go from the palace to not even a tent. This is a drastic change. How often in the Bible do we see that things change drastically quickly? For the good and the bad, right? For the good and the bad. It happens all the time. And so I think we need to keep an eye on that. Now, let me ask you this question. At the end of chapter 2, how do you think Moses? There's one verse in here that really tells it all. I'll just wait for that for a second, because there's something about this that I had missed all these years. A very small sentence that really speaks so loud and so clear to me what Moses was like why Moses responded sort of the way that he did. So I have a couple things here on the map to show you. You have this is where he is, the burning bush is supposed to be, right in that area. And you have up here is where the land of Goshen is, where the Israelites would have been. So you have Goshen on the map right here. And then you have down here, when they finally come and worship at the mountain, it's located in this area. But Midian is right here. So Jethro was a priest from Midian. He's gone over here, and he is at this place right here with the flocks of Jethro. So I think that might give you at least a little idea of what's going on at that particular time. A couple pictures. This is what it looks like. It is desert. I mean, it's like there's mountains, and you'll see a little bit of grass here and there in that picture. So let's go ahead and write a summary, or tell me what your summary is. So raise your hand if you want to share your summary with us, whether you bullet points or paragraph sentences. All right. Yeah, I'm getting there. I think it's on another slide, Brian. Yeah, I have it right here on page 7 of my notes. Don't let me forget. All right, Joy. Very good. Joy wants to share with her summary. Oh, David's first. Dave.
I just want to say that when they were there, that place must have been, had rain so that grass would grow so that the flock that he was pasturing could eat something. I mean, when we look at it, we see that just a
Yeah.
desert. I mean, there is no animal that could live out there.
Yeah.
It must have been, it was maybe better, more rains.
Yeah, I think two things go into that. One, you see God's providence to help his people. And the second thing, you see how hard it was to be a shepherd. I mean, this wasn't like we think of being a shepherd is you fence in your part of your 40 yards that you have, and it has all kinds of green grass on it. You fertilize it every year or whatever the case may be. They had to go look for grass. And that's an image all in the Bible that the shepherds take their sheep to go find the grass, or they go and prepare someplace ahead of time so they could go. All right, who has the microphone? Joy.
Moses was keeping the sheep of Jethro, and he saw a bush that was on fire, but it did not burn up. When he went closer to look, God called to him out of the flame and told him to take off his shoes, because he was on holy ground. God told him that he had seen the suffering of the Israelites and was planning to bring them out of Egyptian bondage and into a land flowing with milk and honey. He told Moses that he would send him to Pharaoh to bring the Israelites out of Egypt. Moses didn't want to go and asked God to send someone else. God told Moses that he would be with him. Moses kept giving excuses. God told him to tell the people that I Am has sent me and that he was there to deliver them out of Egypt. God said for Moses and the elders of the people to go to Pharaoh and tell him that God wanted the Israelites to go 3 days' journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to God. He told Moses that Pharaoh would not let them go. God would then smite the Egyptians with all the wonders that he would do, and then Pharaoh would let them go. Each woman was to ask her neighbor for gold and silver jewelry and for clothing.
All right, very good. Very good summary. Very good summary of the chapter. Hopefully everybody had a chance to read that chapter, and you did that exercise, whether it's in bullet points or in paragraph form. It is a skill that we all need to develop, being able to summarize God's book, right? God's stories, so that we can tell those to other people. You had a lot of the really good points there, and I appreciate that. I think, let me ask you this. What stands out to you after you read it? Just what jumped out at you this time that you read this particular chapter 3? Does anything just jump out at you? All right, we got Terry, we got Debbie.
I think what jumped out at me was the fact that Moses didn't seem so confident in himself.
Okay. Yeah, he's a different guy now, right? So if you were describing Moses when God appears to him, confidence is probably not one of the things you would put on the list. Eager is probably not one of the things you'd put on the list. You would say, he's just a very reluctant person at this point. Terry?
The thing that jumped out to me the most was that Moses was comfortable. He was in his element. You know, nobody was bugging him. He's out in the flocks, out in the field, kind of doing his thing.
Okay.
And then at the end of the chapter, he's not so comfortable.
If I had a gift or a prize, I'd give it to you, because that's the thing that I wanted to get you. Go back to Exodus chapter 2. Exodus chapter 2 and verse 21. Exodus 2 and verse 21. Because now this section will help us understand maybe a little bit why Moses was so reluctant. You use the word comfortable. The New King James Version uses the word content. Moses was content. And I never really picked that up before, that Moses was happy being who Moses was at this particular point. He didn't want to change. He didn't want to do anything else. That old guy, as Phil pointed out, that guy was done. His dreams of what was going to happen, he was 40 years old. He's had 40 years to get used to his life now. But let's read it, because I think it's powerful. Exodus 2 and verse 21. Then Moses was content to live with the man, and he gave Zipporah his daughter to Moses, and she bore him a son. He called his name Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a foreign land. Now it happened in the process of time that the king of Egypt died. Then the children of Israel groaned because of the bondage, and they cried out, and their cry came up to God because of the bondage. God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and God looked upon the children of Israel, and God acknowledged them. If I said to you, I have the secret of contentment, and if you give me enough time, in 1 year's time, you will be totally content with your life. How many of you would buy into that? I mean, isn't contentment sort of like what we're all looking for? Whether you have a lot of money or you want to be, if you have a 2-bedroom house with 1 bathroom, you want to be content. And the Bible talks a lot about the power of contentment. You know, food, clothing, shelter, you ought to be content with that. You would think, how in the world could Moses be content sleeping outside with working for his father-in-law? But he was. And so when God says, all right, I don't want you to be content anymore. I want you to do some things that you are going to find very difficult and are going to take you out of this comfort zone or this contentment realm and put you in a chance where you're going to, go back to suffering with the children of God like he wanted to 40 years ago. That's tough. No, that puts Moses how he acts. Because how many of you get down on Moses during this chapter 3 and chapter 4? And you think, Moses, what are you doing, man? God's giving you the chance of a lifetime. How many of you you knew maybe what God wanted you to do? You knew it was going to be difficult, and you're like, I really don't want to do that. I really don't want to do that. I'm sort of happy and comfortable where I am right now. That's going to take a lot more work, and I don't want to do more work, and I'm going to be. How many of you? I forget who I was talking about the other day. I think it was Emery. Emery I don't see him right now, but he was here early. Oh, he's back there. He said one of the greatest things about his position that he has at work right now is he doesn't have responsibility over people. What if you say, God says, hey, I got something for you. You're content, happy where you are. You got your wife, you got your kids, you got your 2 sons. You're out here with these animals in the nature that Brian talked about a little bit, about enjoying nature to get closer to God. And all of a sudden God says, hey, how would you like to bring an obstinate group of people, maybe a couple million of them, million, 2 million people? You'll be their leader, man. They're going to come to you for everything. I mean, they're not going to know how to do anything without you telling them. They're going to line up all day long from morning till evening and come bring you their problems. And they're not going to appreciate anything that you do. I think I'm pretty good here with these sheep and my 2 sons and my wife. I'm pretty good here. And so that when I read the word content, I thought, you know what, that says a lot to me, and I get that. I get now why Moses probably didn't want to do what God wanted him to do. And I get there sometimes too. All right, Joe.
The one thing that I kindly noticed is, so when God sort of comes to Moses, it's not with sort of big fanfare. I mean, Moses doesn't have the confidence that we just talked about. He comes with a burning bush and things like that. It wasn't a big army or a big, nothing big. And I think that speaks to the wisdom of God, knowing his people, that I cannot come to Moses and scare him. I have to come to him in a way that he may respond. Of course, like Joy said, there's going to be a few things that he says, no, I don't really want to do that. But it was just interesting that it was an interesting way, but it was a low fanfare.
Yeah, and it's going to be opposite of the way he's going to go to Pharaoh, right? He's going to go to Pharaoh,
yeah, exactly.
With all these signs.
But Pharaoh and Moses were two different people.
Yeah, exactly. So here's what I have. Anybody want to share anything on question number 2? Raise your hand. Here's what I have in this episode that happens in Exodus chapter 3 about Moses. First of all, he starts out content. Then he's curious. He sees a bush that is on fire that is not burning up. How many of you would be curious about that? I'd be curious about that, right? Daniel's not here, but Daniel will probably be curious about that too. You have a fire going, and you're like, oh, okay, it's not burning up. What's going on with that? So he goes in there. Then he goes to being afraid. God tells him to take his sandals off. He's on holy ground. And he says he was afraid. He did not want to look at God in verse 6. Stick that in your mind. Because what's going to happen in Exodus 33? God, can I see your glory? You're going to see a totally different man later. A man that goes up on the mountain that has thundering and fires and all this good stuff. And he has face-to-face conversations with God. At this particular point, when God tells who he is, he turns his face. He doesn't want to see God at all. So he's scared. He goes from being afraid to being reluctant to do what God wants us to do. He didn't feel worthy to do it, right? He says in verse 11, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh?" He didn't feel that way 40 years ago, right? He felt like, hey, I am the guy. I mean, of all the people here, I am the one guy that's most qualified to go to Pharaoh and help him get God's people get away. He was assured by God, but still reluctant. And I think he was skeptical. This isn't going to work. And what in the conversation that God has with Moses would have made you skeptical and a little bit leery? Especially at the end, close that last part. You're going to go in there and you're going to have success on day one. What does he say? Yeah, he's not going to listen. I'm going to take you. You're going to go get the elders. You're going to go march right up to Pharaoh, the most powerful person in the world. You're going to say, let God's people go, the God of the Hebrews go 3 days journey out in the wilderness. And he's going to look at you and say, no. But I'm going to stay on the case. I'm going to be there, and I'm going to help you go through all of that as well. Okay, so I do want to talk briefly about the name here. The book is a book originally titled Names. And so when Moses says, I'm going to go, I'm going to talk to these people, and they're going to say, who sent me? What do I tell them? Brian, you pointed out that Jehovah was used in the book of Genesis, but I want you to notice a couple of things about this. I am who I am, or I am. Translating this from Hebrew to English is sort of difficult. One reason is, now I'm not a grammar expert like Brian or some of you in the room here, but in the Hebrew grammar, you have a sense where verbs have two tenses, and it's based on action. So imperfect it is an action that is not completed yet. And if you have a perfect tense, it is an action that is completed. So that's the tense of verbs in the Hebrew language. Now the imperfect could be, it's something that has started and has not been finished. That's imperfect, right? It started, it's still going on, it's not complete, it's not perfect yet. Or it could be something that starts in the future because it hasn't started yet, right? It can't be completed because it hasn't started. So those are the tenses of verbs in the Hebrew language. Now, what are the tenses of verbs in the English language? Past, present, and future, right? So you take verbs that are defined by action only and trying to translate those verbs into verbs that are tied to time, past, present, and future. So one of the things that I was reading, I have that up there, hopefully you can read it, is that a Hebrew scholar was saying there's several ways this name of God, as he says it, could be translated. One is, I will exist because I will exist. Future tense, I will exist because I will exist. I exist because I exist. I am who I am. I will be who I will be. And I am that which exists. Okay, so those are all proper translations of those three words in the Hebrew language. And he made this very interesting case is, in English, what do we want to do? Now, a translator has to do this, but in English, if you had 5 choices, what are you going to do? What? The shortest one? All right. You're going to pick one, right? You're going to pick one of these, whether it's the shortest one, the longest, whatever the case may be. The point of this Hebrew scholar was all of them. It is not one or the other. The very essence of the phrase that God uses to give his name is all of these things. And so when those who spoke Hebrew would have heard this, they would have defined it not in one of these 5 ways, but in all of these 5 ways. And they would have had a much deeper understanding of what this was all about. All 3 of those are correct. Another guy points out, this even happened when they translated the Hebrew over to Greek, that there was this tense problem. And so instead of I exist, it's I am present. I exist and am present. So, and I'm going to read the second paragraph here. In God's name, God made himself known as a present being, present with and for his people. And wherever God's presence is invoked, that announcement is pregnant with the certainty, the attention, his care, his power, and his grace. Perhaps a helpful paraphrase of God's word at the burning bush would be, say to the people of Israel, I am present. I am here. I exist. I've always existed. And I'm here with you. I've always been with you. God sent Moses to the people of Israel with that marvelous announcement, and the subsequent Exodus events would be an object lesson for all generations that God is present with his people. Isn't that one of the things through the Bible that is consistent? God wants to be with his people. You have the tabernacle in the middle of the people. You have the garden. You have all these things are true about that, and that's true about God working with us today, living with us today. Now, dial that away, because that is going to come back up later, because when they get ready to leave Mount Sinai, God says, my presence is going to go with you. Sort of a play on his name. I am present with you and I'm going with you. What does Moses say about that?
He doesn't want to leave unless he's with him.
Yes, if your presence doesn't go with us, I don't want to go. And so if you're not who you said you were when I asked what your name was, there's no need in me going forward. I don't want to. If you're not the God that's present, the God that exists for all of eternity and will exist and is with your people today, then I don't want to go with you, which leads us to how would reading Exodus 3 have helped the first recipients? Raise your hand. Terry has something up here. Somebody else raise your hand over here. Or back there. Raise your hand. You have something on that piece of paper. Somebody has something brilliant and profound on their piece of paper. Terry?
They're about to go into the mouth of the lion, per se, and seeing that God was with the Israelites during their bondage would assure this new generation of people that he's going to be with them as they go into Canaan.
Yeah, so they're assured of God's presence going with them. That's important, right? If God's not going to go with us into the land, we don't want to go. We're not ready to go. Brian has one. Oh, stop. Joy has it. All right, Joy.
It would have helped them have a better knowledge of God and of his power.
Yeah, now I know who God is. Now that's going to continue to grow, right? And throughout this entire book, they're going to, as they're reading this, wow, God is powerful. God is powerful. Look at what God did. Look what it's going to continue to go in that. Now, I like the fact that he harkens back to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because when you read the stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, can you doubt that God was with them? No. When you're looking at that years where they're in slavery, can you sort of be, maybe God wasn't there? So multiple times in the text, he not only gives his name, but he goes, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Brian?
Yeah, connected to that, the whole reason he tells Moses, I'm rescuing the people, is to bring them into the land that I promised to give them to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so if they're on the brink of the promised land, it's really scary. They're going to have to go to battle. It's like, okay, but you need to be reminded the whole reason you're here is because God is going to bring you into this land.
And how exciting would that have been if you were one of those getting ready to go in, all this information that you've just been reading through in the Pentateuch, and you're like, man, we are going to go in. We're going to take this, and it's not going to be a problem. I think you hearken back to why the people gave Moses such a hard time. Why did our dads or fathers and mothers decide not to go into the promised land with a God like this working for them? Those who were there under the age of 20, they knew, because multiple times in chapter 3, it says, I'm taking you to a land that flows with milk and honey. This becomes a battling thing between God and the people. There's no land with milk and honey. You're not taking us to land. We don't see any milk. We don't see any honey. We see nothing. The people are going to say, we did see a land flowing with milk and honey, because when our spies brought the stuff back, it was a land flowing with milk and honey. I'm excited to go there. Brandon?
Earlier you asked what stands out in the chapter, and it's something that's been a question of mine for a little while. If the intention was for them to leave and go into Canaan and reside in their promised land, why in verse 18 are they told to go to Pharaoh and say that they would only be gone for 3 days? What would be the reason for that?
Okay, anybody have a thought on that? Yeah, I think one might just be an idea of wisdom. You go to Pharaoh and say, hey, we're going to go forever. All right? Let us go forever. And we're not coming back. That would have been probably a less likely scenario to get going. That's my original thought on that. Obviously, they do they do leave eventually, and they get to the land. All right, very good. Brian has the questions in the back for you for Sunday. And if you want to, you can share with one another and me answers to question number 5 about anything in the story that stands out to you as you read it this time.